Right, almost the last day of the inquiry. I'm with Alan Collins, haven't spoken to him for a while. He can give us an update, and he's with...
Carrie Modral, Chair of the Jersey Care Leavers.
Gracia, Administrator, Jersey Care Leavers.
Technically, you're actually with the Jersey Care Leavers today, aren't you, Alan?
I am indeed.
So, you spoke very well today about human rights, which I was very pleased to hear, but a very narrow technical aspect, detention, a very narrow aspect of the whole scandal which is fallen on Jersey. I was pleased to hear that because it set my mind buzzing how we apply these human rights standards in a practical sense. Somebody whose rights have been abused, what do they do with them?
Well, someone who says that their rights have been abused, they've got the right to hold those who've gone and abused their rights accountable.
That's the theory.
That's the theory.
In practice, if you're a 12-year-old kid and your rights have been abused...
Well, in theory, then those who are responsible for your care, whether it's your parent or the state, are supposed to protect those rights and enforce those rights.
I mean, today you list a whole catalogue of failures in the local system which are mounted by the very fact of their existence, without actually locking anybody up, that the law was so defective here in so many aspects, about virtually any aspect of taking a youngster under the age of 20, I think it could be in some cases. You take them and put them into detention or restrain them or anything. It was virtually, there was no legal framework to do it.
Well, that's the issue that the inquiry needs to address. So these rights, whether they are UN Convention rights or European Commission rights, they provide a window for us to look through to see what the culture is.
But who's going to do it? You raised it eloquently today, but you're a lawyer engaged to look at it today.
Well, the inquiry has been asked by the JCLA to look. So in our submission today, we pointed to concerns and we set out a series of questions which we say the inquiry should answer or try and answer under the terms of reference. So you've got a battery of rights that are meant to protect children, and in particular vulnerable children, and vulnerable children does include children in trouble with the law.
You referred specifically to the magistrate today and how he was administering what, according to your supposition, was totally bogus laws, and the law profession in the island remained totally silent. All the lawyers in the island remained silent.
That the other parties have got an opportunity, by the sounds of it, to address what we have raised. We can only go by the evidence that was put in front of the inquiry and the laws as we understand them. So, for example, if youngsters were being sentenced to probation orders with a condition of residence at Lashen, the question is, was that a legally sound sentence? Now, when you take that kind of sentence and you measure it against the laws as they appear to have been, and convention rights and European Convention rights, we say there's a question mark over it. Now, maybe the other parties are going to be able to say to the inquiry, no, that kind of sentence was perfectly legitimate, it's legal, it's sound, not a problem. But on the basis of what evidence has been given so far from certain witnesses, the JCLA is right, in my opinion, to ask the question, was it a legitimate sentence or was it a custodial sentence by the back door? Because if it was a custodial sentence by the back door, then it's got a question mark over its legality. And the Howard League for Penal Reform in the past has questioned the use of custody and probation orders with a condition of residence and so on. So this isn't exactly a new
Well, indeed, it's
subject.
not a new thing.
It's something that's come up before.
And it's not just lawyers, it's social workers, everybody involved with any aspect of child welfare and they're trained somewhere else, will be totally familiar with the procedures that are supposed to apply and the safeguards that are supposed to be in place. How can they possibly not know since 1945?
Well, it's a good question that you're asking, and it comes back to what I say is a cultural issue. So we keep on saying in our submissions to the inquiry, you've got to look at the culture, and we've been hearing today from, in other submissions, the word culture, the term culture, it keeps on coming up. And I think that's one of the, this goes to the kernel, the heart of everything. What was the culture? Because you've got to understand the culture to understand why all these various things happened. Because if you don't understand the culture, you're just going to go round and round in circles.
Whatever town you're in, based in the UK now, but suppose there's a community there of 100 lawyers. It's inconceivable, isn't it, that these sort of breaches, if they are breaches, could take place consistently year after year, and not one of those 100 lawyers waking up to the fact.
Well, you would like to think that wouldn't happen. But, as I said, the inquiry in examining these issues that we've been hearing about today, as I said, is going to have to look at the culture, because unless you can get to grips with that, how on earth can you work out why some of these things happened
and this is just, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but this is a simple issue of detention. I mean, it's fairly simple to establish the rules on what detention are. You shall go before a tribunal and they shall adjudicate. And if they send you away, they come back in 3 days and reconsider the matter. Fairly simple to have rules, isn't it?
Yes, I would say so.
More difficult, this is one of the problems I'm having, more difficult is a case of abuse. If you're saying I've been sexually abused, physically abused in an institution, and you want to bring a rights case, much more difficult to establish that because you've got there's much more intangible, isn't it? You say I've been abused, I say you haven't been abused, it's not so. But if you've got a court making absolute clear decisions, we're going to lock you away. That's pretty simple, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot in there. So anybody, doesn't matter who you are, you have got rights. You've got certain safeguards which have to be respected by the state, whether we're talking about Jersey, the UK, wherever. And if those rights are infringed, then you are entitled to take the state to court and get redress. That's what the law says.
Swing to you. You've been battling this. Has the law officers ever come to you and said, look, your rights, lots of rights, have been abused here. We're going to have to do something. Have they ever said that to you?
No.
Instead of defending themselves and everything they've done for the past 30 years, have they ever said that?
Human rights has never been raised at all.
It's almost as though it doesn't exist in this island, isn't it?
No. Something in law needs to be put in place, especially to protect children. A written report should be mandatory that a written report is made and submitted on any abuse that is reported by a child. A child's not going to know about human rights. It needs somebody, a commissioner, ombudsman, to be able to speak for those children, because as it stands, they don't know their rights, they're not being told.
But even
their
now,
rights.
Alan's flagged them up today, and I feel sure they've been flagged up before. I don't know, Alan, you may know locally. Are they writing these rules now? Are they writing this mandate to say that if you're going to lock a child away?
One would hope so, but I think,
You don't know if they're doing it.
they've got a long way to go before they reach that point. I mean, there's old hurdles they've still got to jump over first before they come to modern day laws. So it's going to take
I've
a
been
long
so
time.
shocked in the last 2 days to hear the twaddle, the other side of it, if I can call them the other side, have been expressing. Because it really is nonsense, and it was, we all know, attacking two policemen who are no longer here. And what they got to do with it is not their problem. These problems are long established problems in the system.
Exactly, but have we, the submissions you and I heard yesterday, they're supposed to be answering points in council's final submission, and I wasn't here for the last session of submissions, but it seems to me the Law Officers Department lawyer crucified Lenny Harper and Graham Power, and they did exactly the same yesterday. So they just repeated what they said before, and they haven't really answered what they've come here to answer. police lawyer likewise. He also said that, he was also damning of them. Without Lenny Harper and Graham Powell,
Exactly.
we wouldn't be sitting here today, I don't think.
Exactly.
I don't think we would.
And we've heard today the catalogue of known abuses, and for all the hurdles that there
Yes.
are which prevent abuse being announced or declared or discovered. We've heard it today how many cases have been disclosed,
I know.
largely as a result of their efforts, because they
Exactly.
made a climate where it could be disclosed.
And I think there are still more people out there that have been abused that just haven't been able to come forward or not willing to come forward, but they opened a can of worms that the states of Jersey didn't like.
What do you think, Alan? I mean, this is presumably your last address to the tribunal, is it? Or to
I
the...
assume so. What is needed is a children's ombudsman who's got teeth. That is someone who can hold the powers that be to account. If you really want change and you really want to get things changed for the better, you're going to need an ombudsman.
But we heard the Chief Minister in his little address he gave a couple of months ago, and they said, well, can you guarantee whatever we put in our report, you'll implement it? And he said, of course, I'm only one, the usual thing, I'm only one member of the states, and I might want to put forward your proposal. There's no way I can guarantee, which I suppose in absolute honesty is true. You can't require a government to do anything, but it was a very lacklustre performance, wasn't it? There wasn't much commitment. And the enormity of the problem, it was to say, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't.
But it's going to be a hard choice, because if you don't, then all the problems and issues that we've been hearing about over the last 18 months,
Is it too late?
Where are they going to be left? Where does that leave Jersey? Where does it leave all the issues that are still alive? Is that a price worth paying?
Well, we've had
I would
visits.
say not.
We've had visits from the Council of Europe who've been to see the prison, and as a result of what they've done, they've had to make reforms because of these very issues, actually, about the way young people are being detained. That's one of the live issues up there. And they obviously will come back if they're invited. Is there anybody powerful enough to invite them to come back if there's a report that comes out and says these things are rotten and nothing's done about it?
Well, the problem is if you say if you sign up to these international and European standards, you're expected to adhere to them. And then if something goes wrong because you don't, then it's going to end up costing money and reputation. That's the price that gets paid when governments do not.
But the prison visit side of it only comes about because the UK has an obligation to report on the way this is being well governed here, and it's only because the UK has an obligation that they got called in. Left to their own devices, this government here will never call in the Council of Europe, will they?
It comes back to hard choices, because if you sign up to conventions and treaties and so on, and you don't adhere to them, then you're just kicking the can down the road, and one day that can is not going to roll down the road, and you're going to be held accountable.
Ironically, the Convention of Human Rights was easier to take to Strasbourg before they signed it up in 2006 and made it applicable locally, because now there is a procedure and you've got to exhaust all your domestic remedies before you can go. I mean, obviously on the basis that you've got a system here which is not very aware of human rights, and if you raise a human rights issue they don't want to hear it. So taking a case, in my view, to the local courts isn't going to get you very far. Previously you could go more or less direct to Strasbourg because they accepted that there was no procedure. Now you've got to go all the way through at enormous expense. It could even be to the Privy Council or whatever masquerades as the Privy Council these days, because it is a effective remedy in theory. So it's getting more difficult in the sense to take action from within the island. I mean, it's outside. It's calling the cavalry again, isn't it?
Access to justice may well be an issue here, but it's also an issue in other countries, including England. It's a real challenge. Let's not pretend that it's easy, because it isn't, as you've just eloquently explained.
You started off, and you frightened them initially by saying about bringing cases in the UK courts to start with, which had a wonderful reaction here, a bit like putting on salt on a slug. It motivated them, didn't it? So is that
Well, it's very kind of you to say that, and I like the analogy. Yeah, I dread to think who the slug is, but
is that a
Several.
potential a recourse?
the job of a lawyer is to advise and represent, and in doing that, you have to use your legal knowledge and experience of pushing the boundaries and finding new ways in order to get people justice if they are being deprived of justice. That's what the job's all about.
I get wound up just coming to these things. You've been battling this for years. Can the care leavers group keep going? Is there more battle? Can you really take on any more battles?
No, Jersey care leavers have achieved all their objectives now. We've got Bernardos in Jersey now that
Right.
take on 16 to 21-year-olds. I'm trying to push for that to go to 25, so the care leavers of today have a body of people to go to for help with education, with employment, with accommodation, with health issues. One thing I want to mention is a lot of children back in the 70s and the 80s had mental health issues which were not recognised. You had ADHD, you had Asperger's, you had all those types of illnesses that weren't recognised in Jersey back in the 70s, 80s, possibly even the 90s. Children did have behavioural problems that were connected to mental health issues, but not recognised.
I'm interested you talk about the age limit, up to 21 or whatever and beyond. I go to scrutiny with monotonous regularity, and for as long as I've been going, I've been hearing groups coming along and saying, any help we get stops when the child is 16. Once they get past 16, there's no more support for us. And that is being said, and the committee and the panels sit there, oh, that's very serious, we have to do so. Nothing happens, year after year after year. Is anything, can you see anything happening in the age?
We're working on it, and that is something I'm going to move forward with. I've already spoken to the Chief Minister about it. If a child were living in its normal environment with its parents, it would leave home at 21, decide that it can't afford that living on their own, or they wanted to go home to their parents, and they can. The children from the care system, the corporate parents being the states of Jersey, have a right to take them back in if they think they can't cope in the big world on their own at 21, 16, 17, 21, and they should have that till they're 25.
If you were a child and if you knew what you know now on a legal basis, would you want to be put into a care system?
No.
Well, what do we do about that then?
For a start, as I said, we're taking a small but fundamental step, which is to appoint a children's ombudsman and someone who's got teeth. By taking that step, you've then got the ability to effect change and change for the good. So yeah, the mental health issue is an important one. It's a stark one, not just here in Jersey, but also in England and Wales. You know, it's just this arbitrary cutting off. It's just brainless. You know, it doesn't make any sense at all, and it should not be beyond the logic of some very capable people to address that. You know, it's not beyond.
Jill, anything? You agree with that, presumably? Ombudsman?
I think it's
Children's minister or what or something?
no
under
children's minister. No, most
No.
definitely not. And I gave my reasons.
Well, there's as was discussed at the panel in a previous meeting, once people get in office for a few years, they get very comfortable and get very pally with everybody and they lose their rough
Exactly.
edges. So that you want somebody with rough edges, don't you?
Of course you do. It's got to be somebody independent, off island, you know, from away
Right.
from Jersey. But with the present system of consensual government, it won't work. I know people are pushing for that.
The
but
first word on this panel, which is you've been addressing today, is independent. Now, when it was first announced, there was a huge amount of concern about whether it was going to be independent. Do you think it has been?
It's been as independent as it can be. I was rather furious actually with the interruption with the data commissioner.
Right, right.
It was a needless task.
I can't see why on earth that was done. All that work by somebody. Why did they do it? Who put them up to it? It's extraordinary, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Unbelievable. If it was obviously somebody's been working on this the whole way through. It's not just
Absolutely.
happened. You know, someone was set there to try and make a damning report,
Yeah.
which I think has been pulled to pieces. I mean, the panel have pulled it to pieces. A complete nonsense and a waste of money. But
Well, I tried to read the report from the data and so on. That's that. It just seemed to be full of nothing. But then, how do I know? I'm not a lawyer. You're a lawyer. Was it full of nothing?
Well, my comment would be, well, having read it, I wasn't exactly sure whether there had actually been any official complaints. And if
Well,
complaints had not been made, then I would question the value of the report for that fact alone.
Mischief making, that's all
Yes.
it was.
Yes, it does make you wonder about the motivation of people who've obviously got authority to do things, why they want to do it. I'm going to close here, but I got one last question since it's the topical question of the week in a local format. Will the decision which they're making over in the UK on the 23rd make any difference to all this?
Probably not. I have
No.
voted, but whether my vote will make a heap of a difference, I doubt very much. But I suspect this time next week we could easily have the same conversation as we're having today.
Okay. Any thoughts? No? Okay.
I think it'll take an awful lot to make a difference here.
November the 5th then, here we are, get the...
Yes.
Excellent.
In the Royal Square?